still see the container where those embers were? Or?
No. No, we didn't find a container, just based on examination of the scene. But ascertain at this point.
You know, there's some accounts that the grandfather had been trying to save the girls. Do you know anything about their final moments?
As I stated, we're still trying to put and we still have additional interviews to.
When we went into the recovery mode, we found the grandfather in the back rear room of the house. He had actually made it outside the structure. He had gone through a window that was in the rear. They had a flat roof there, and they were renovating it, and they were making what we call a rain roof. So they had these roof rafters that were pitched on an angle, and they were covered with what we call Luan board. When he went through the window, he fell through the between the rafters and through the Luan board, so he was not visible to us. When we decided that we needed to open up that area, that's when we discovered him. Just inside the window that he came out of, we found one of the young children. I guess there were a pile of books. It looks like she was placed on the books so he could get out the window and then reach in and grab her. But when he went out the window, that's when he succumbed, and she died just inside the window.
And this was on which floor?
This was on the second floor.
Chief, could you tell us, is there anything in your experience that would have prepared you for this?
After 37 and a half years, 38 years on the job, you're never prepared for anything like this. It's heartbreaking. I had to recall 70 firefighters today for debriefing, and most of them broke down. We're going to continue with counseling. So can you be prepared for this? No. Is it our job to do something? Yes. Our job is to rescue people when they're in danger. You feel like when you don't make that rescue that you failed, and I don't think anybody wants to fail.
The other victims, Chief, the two other girls, they weren't in the same room?
No, what had happened was they originally told us that they were upstairs on the third floor. That's why the rescue attempt was made on the third floor. Then the male occupant had told us that he had led the two girls downstairs, so now they were on the second floor. But the heat drove them to get separated. Stairwell between the second and third floor.
Did the renovation require sprinklers?
I couldn't answer that. I would have to ask.
So does the code require sprinklers in a renovation?
No, not in single-family homes in Connecticut. It's been talked about, but it is not a code requirement.
So they had a building plan and a construction permit, but no certificate of occupancy?
There is a certificate of occupancy already in place on that house by virtue of its age. What happens when you undertake a renovation in the city of Stamford is you submit plans, and then those, as work progresses, inspections are made periodically. At the end of those inspections, you call in for a final inspection, and if everything is code compliant and meets the letter of the code, Connecticut Building and Safety Code, you're issued a certificate of approval to move in.
When they moved in a year ago, wouldn't there have been an inspection with the fire alarm existing there? I mean, how could somebody move into a home that didn't have an...
They bought an existing home, and at that point in time, whether they moved in or not, it was perfectly legitimate for them to do that. They filed a building...
There had been a smoke alarm in the house in order for them to be able to move in.
We don't know the answer to that. There's no pre-inspection when someone buys a house and moves into it. Usually what happens is you rely on your education, you rely on your advisors, your consultants to let you know certain things that you need to do in the house, but there is no requirement that smoke detection systems be installed.
Did they have, do you know, did they have homeowners insurance? You have to have it.
That I don't know. That I don't.
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, so
Yes,
they
Bill.
needed that occupancy technically to be living in that house, that the final approval. So technically, they needed that to be in there, right?
Technically, according to the letter, they needed that to live in certain portions of the house. That's correct.
Certain portions.
Correct.
Oh, but there were other portions that they
That were already covered under their CO, that weren't touched by
We
renovation.
don't know which.
And we don't know what that is. And the chief building official will have a report on my desk on that shortly.
There's no smoke detector anywhere in the house?
We don't know that.
There was smoke detector?
We don't know the answer to that.
Can you describe a little bit of what the renovation was and whether or not there were any violations of?
Yes, I can. The renovations consisted of kitchen, bathrooms, some minor changes to the floor plan in terms of relocating some petitions, the addition of the small laundry room or mud room in the back of the house, the rebuilding of the porches, and that was all covered under a building permit. And there was even a revision to the building permit that was properly recorded with the building department. The last inspection took place sometime in July.
Mayor, Mrs. Badger's reaction to the preliminary results?
We have none.
Did you talk to her? Did the city reach out to the family?
We did not. The investigators probably talked to her, but I have no knowledge of that.
Maybe Mr. Callahan, has your investigators had any contact with her?
Just with the initial preliminary interview that was done at the hospital, and we're trying to get in touch with her again to follow up.
And is she the person who took the embers out, or was that her friend?
It's believed to be her friend.
And have you soaked them? That's what you're supposed to do, soak them in water?
That's still being looked at, but it doesn't appear to be.
Can you talk about how dangerous that is?
Smoke detectors, because I've heard two things. Are we certain whether or not there were smoke detectors?
That has not yet been determined as whether there was actual smoke detectors present.
So it's undetermined at this time?
That's correct.
But you do not believe that smoke alarms went off in the house?
That's still trying to be determined.
Can you discuss how all this is determined now that the house is raised, what the protocol is for you to follow through on this investigation?
We did an on-scene investigation. We did an on-scene investigation, but due to the structural instability of the building, we weren't be able to get to all areas of the building. But initial interviews, we're trying to determine whether smoke detection was present or not, and that hasn't yet to be determined.
So you have to rely on basically eyewitness testimony.
That's
People
correct.
In the house, you can't use the home because it's not there anymore.
That's correct. Not because it's not there anymore, but our initial on-scene investigation did not indicate whether they were there or not. It was not capable of being determined.
So, sir, could you clarify, should they or should they not have been in the house?
I believe
When they pulled their building permit, as the mayor said, that they renovated almost the entire second floor, every room on the entire second floor except for the master bedroom. So until they get a certificate of approval, they should not be living in those quarters that were renovated.
Were they?
I can't tell you that. I don't know where they were living, if they were living in that area. I'm sorry?
What did Mrs. Badger say?
I did not speak to Mrs. Badger. I think only the fire marshal's office did.
I believe, as a parent, at the time of the fire, they were living, within the dwelling, and sleeping.
Did she
So
tell
if
you
they
where
were
she
renovating the second floor and not supposed to stay there, were they allowed to be living on the third floor?
I don't have an answer to that right now.
Chief, can you talk about, I understand Mrs. Badger tried to go back in to save her children. She wanted to try to regain entry. Is that true?
Mrs. Badger was out a window. There was scaffolding on the outside of the structure, so it looked like some of the outside of the structure was being renovated. When the crews arrived on the scene, the male occupant was down on the ground. He had tried to gain entry back into the house. Obviously, he couldn't do that with the amount of fire that was present. Mrs. Badger was helped down from the second floor roof, and she told the crews again that her children were up on the third floor in what we call the widow's watch, which was on the extreme left side, third floor of the structure in the front. When the crews made the third floor, made those two rooms, they found nobody. When they came out, because of the heat and fire, the male occupant told them that he had, again, delivered the girls down to the second floor, was leading them out, but the girls panicked, and one obviously ran upstairs, one went another direction. He lost sight of them, so he exited the structure. The crews went in now on the second floor because he was outside and told them where they were. They tried the second floor. Again, they were pushed back by the heat and fire. They could not find the girls. Not for trying, that's for sure.
The grandfather again, he was outside.
The grandfather had made it to the back of the house. He obviously found one of the young children because he guided her to the window that he went through. When he stepped through that window, his life ended.
What happened then?
It looks like he fell face forward because that's the position we had found him in. And then we found a little girl just inside that structure, just inside that window that he was just outside of.
So his cause of death, we don't know yet?
We don't know. We haven't. I've heard he had carbon monoxide poisoning. All I could tell you is that the state medical examiner has not given us a toxicology report on any of the individuals in that structure. So we don't know what the cause of death for the grandfather was.
Chief, preliminarily, do you have an indication whether or not the actual construction may have contributed to either the intensity of the fire or perhaps that there may or may not have been violations?
There was an extremely large amount of fire when we first arrived on the scene. I cannot tell you if any renovations at all were being conducted on the inside of that structure because we simply don't know. We know that they scaffolded the outside of the structure, so we knew that some outside renovation was being completed. But as far as inside the structure, there was so much fire, and when it was out, we couldn't tell if it was being renovated at that point or not. What I can tell you is that when we went in for body recovery, the structure was so weakened that we had to place ladders within the building flat so that the firefighters could crawl across them and distribute their weight as they did their searches, which was a very dangerous operation. Once we recovered all the bodies, once the fire marshals had completed their technical investigation of the building was not safe to be left standing. That's when the decision of the building department came and made the decision to take that building down. As the fire department, we no longer needed it for our investigation, and so it was unsafe, and it would be unsafe for any resident in the city of Stamford who may have wandered onto that property in the middle of the night, whatever. So I thought the city was prudent and worked fast in taking that building down.
Sir, this is actually for the fire marshal. It's extremely confusing. First we heard that you did not believe the fire alarms went off, and then you said you don't know if they were, it's unclear. Can we just get a solid answer here? What did Mrs. Badger say? She heard a fire alarm?
No, that's still being actively looked at.
What did she say?
We haven't addressed that issue yet with her. It's only been 2 days since the initial incident. We made initial contact, an interview with Mrs. Badger, with some preliminary statements of what took place from the 3:30 to the time of the fire.
But did she say when she woke up the house was engulfed, or she woke up to an alarm?
That hasn't been determined yet.
So you have not spoken with Ms. Badger since that?
Not since the initial, interview that was done on Sunday.
May I just say one thing? Mrs. Badger, we keep referring to Mrs. Badger. Mrs. Badger lost her 3 children and her 2 parents. When we made the initial contact with Mrs. Badger, the last thing on our minds to talk to her about was whether or not her building permit was valid, or her smoke detectors were working, or any of that. There was much more important things that had to be attended to regarding Mrs. Badger. As the follow-up investigation continues, and it will continue, those are the kinds of questions that will be asked. Please help us piece together all of the things, all of the circumstances that led to this catastrophic fire, why it happened in the first place. Can you help us determine exactly what happened? Did you hear the smoke alarms going off? Those are questions that we will pursue, but not now.
Mayor, we have a final question, Mayor. Could you
Yes.
explain- Mayor, could you explain, is there a 9/11 counseling crew here?
Yes,
Members-
I'll confirm that. That is correct.
Could you explain what they're doing? Just very briefly, give us a brief summary of their purpose.
There are roughly 70 firefighters and I believe a handful, half a dozen or so, police officers and emergency medical people who are on the scene, who are being talked to by people who have been in similar crises, who have post-traumatic experience, and training, counseling, and debriefing. And they're working with the firefighters and the emergency response people to get through the issues that they may have.
Mayor, I'd like to ask the gentleman in the blue tie just one more time. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. But you were the one who said initially you don't believe there were smoke alarms detected.
Correct.
And sir, could you say and spell your name, please?
It's O-R-G-E-R-A.
And your first name, sir?
Ernie, E-R-N-I-E.
And your title, please?
Director of Operations, City of Stamford.
No, why did you say that?
Well, I said that initially because there is a system that is in the house that is ready to be hooked up for hardwired smoke detection, which was we don't believe was active at that time.
So
Now, there could have been battery-operated system in there, but it wasn't a hardwired system.
the electrical plan submitted to the city.
That is correct.
Showed hardwired smoke detection through the house.
Correct. And not through the house, only the renovated
The
area.
renovated area.
Correct.
And that's required by code?
I believe it is. Yes. If there's renovation done and the ceilings are open or the walls are down to the studs, yes, it requires it.
Do they have a valid certificate of occupancy based on everything that's happening?
They didn't require a certificate of occupancy when they purchased the house. But once you do the renovation on the house and it's completed and you call for a final inspection, then you will be issued a certificate of approval.
Was this house safe to live in?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. I didn't inspect it. We haven't had an inspection since July. We had all rough inspections. It was fine.
What kind of-
If the rough inspections were fine.
There have been
When
no
was that inspection?
violations?
When was that last, July of this year?
That's correct. July of 11.
And who inspected that? And for what reason?
Our building officials inspected the house, plumbing, electrical, and rough framing.
Because of the ongoing
Permit. That's correct.
So there had been no violations prior to July. Is that what you're saying? Is that clear?
That's clear,
Okay.
yes.
Also, just to be clear, they were allowed to live in that unrenovated portions, or I'm sorry, the portions of the home that were not under construction, which was basically the entire second floor except the master bedroom was under construction.
Correct.
Okay. So if technically, if they were to follow the letter of the law, they had to have been issued a certificate of occupancy to be on that second floor in every portion besides the master bedroom.
Certificate of approval, that's
I'm
correct.
sorry, certificate of approval, and they didn't have that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Could you
Just to be
explain-
clear,
could you-
thank
Sir,
you.
could you explain one last time the sequence of events? As I understand it, somebody took fireplace embers, they put them in a bin outside the house, and then that
Okay.
was the spark and tinder for the blaze?
It appears that sometime after 3, the embers in the fireplace were cleaned out, placed in a bag, and removed to the outside, either to the mudroom or the trash enclosure area.
Outside
You
the
mean
structure,
outside or?
Yeah, well, the mudroom is part of the structure, and the trash enclosure was adjacent
Is
to
that
it.
an interior space, or is that outside the house or inside?
It's technically it's attached to the rear portion of the house.
Are there walls and a ceiling? In other words,
Yes.
in that part sort of thing.
That's
And-
correct.
And so there's no way like wind could have come and
All depending on which area. We haven't ascertained where exactly they were put, but they're either in the mudroom or adjacent to the mudroom in the trash enclosure.
Based on the conditions, were they, I'm going back to that prior question, were they allowed to be in the house based on the conditions, the renovations and the lack of?
I think that's been spoken of as far as the building permit process.
They were not supposed to be in there?
Not in the renovated area.
Not in the according to the building department.
Can you talk about how dangerous it is? The fires start all the time from these burning embers. Is there like a time frame people should wait before they dump out their ashes?
Just generally, if you do clean out your ashes, they should be put in a metal bucket, removed to the outside, and put in water.
When you say bag, Marshal, what do you mean by bag?
Some type of bag. That's, like I previously said, we're still trying to ascertain what type, they were placed in a bag, but what type of bag, we don't know at this point.
From the initial interviews that you had done with the two survivors, did they say whether it was heat, whether it was smoke, what it was that woke them up?
Again, we're still trying to ascertain all the facts.
Can you talk about how quickly the fire spread and how long before you brought it under control?
Well, upon arrival, I'm sure you've all seen the video that was taped by neighbor Charles Mangano, and it shows the back of the house from his residence fully engulfed in flames. That was prior to the fire department arrival. So there was quite a bit of fire encountered by our crews when we arrived on the scene. If they went to bed between 3 and 3:30, and the call came in at 4:52. I'm not sure how much headway the fire had, but it was between that time frame that the fire started.
Did it appear to spread up the outside of the house?
From the video that I have viewed from Mr. Mangano, the entire back of the house was in flames, but that was from a distance away, so you couldn't get a perspective of whether it was from the extreme outside of the house or within the structure itself.
Would you be surprised with 38 years of experience that if somebody did have a smoke alarm, that they would not have gotten out prior to the house being that engulfed?
Well, let's talk about smoke alarms for a minute. I mean, when we go and test a house with a smoke alarm, we could take the smoke from a cigarette, hold it under the smoke alarm, and that smoke alarm is going to activate. Normally, the fire marshals use a spray, and it activates. So they activate pretty quickly, and they're loud. If they're hardwired within a structure, when one is activated, all of the smoke detectors go off. And what's nice about having hardwired smoke detectors is that they run off your electricity, and when your power goes out, they have a battery backup, so you're always protected. And do they make a difference? Sure, they make a difference, because any warning system that gives you a head start in a fire is going to help you.
If it was going out the back of the house, would it have set off an alarm if it was on the outside of the home? Possible that it went up and...
It's hard to say. It all depends on the direction of the wind, if it's outside the house. You know, inside the house there's no wind, so it'll find its way to that smoke detector. But down by the water, at that time, who knows? I mean, I don't know what the wind temperature was, what the wind direction was, or what speed it was traveling at.
Where was each child
I think you said that Mrs. Badger was helped down from a second floor window.
She was helped down off the scaffold.
Yes. Was she climbing back up the scaffold to try to get in? Had she already gotten out and then was climbing up a different way, or
No,
was she originally on the second floor but had fled to that scaffold area?
From what they told me, that she was on the scaffold, and they helped her down. They got her down. I think they might have thrown a ladder to get her down off, but they got her down, and that's when she told them where the children were.
Where were the children found by name?
I don't know their names. I just know that in the front of the house there's a dormer next to the widow's watch, and in that room We found a young child and the grandmother in a hallway that would lead from or a stairwell that would lead from the second to third floor. We found one, I believe, up on the third floor. We found the grandfather outside the structure in the back, and we found the little girl that was with him just inside that window in the rear room.
What was your
She was sitting on books, right?
what was your response time from the time of the call?
I believe it was less than 6 minutes.
Sir, I
The
have-
crews were actually on another call. The South End station and the deputy were already on another box alarm. They had freed up, so they were rolling back to the houses when that call came in. So the response time was pretty quick to get down to this fire.
Sir, I understand that your contact with Mrs. Backer is limited about her state of mind, but in your experience, does it ever come to a point when something is so horrible that it's beyond somebody's ability to recover from?
Sure. Sure. I mean, that's how the human body works. I mean, anybody that's been in a car accident, for the most part, can't recall what happened during that accident. And that's just the way our systems work. Your brain takes over and blocks out stuff like that so that you can't recall it. So in her state of mind, it's going to be a while. I mean, that poor woman lost her entire family in one fell swoop. I couldn't imagine how she feels.
So the question was asked several times again to the marshal. I'm sorry for asking this again, but it's just really, really confusing, the whole occupancy thing. Now, from what I understand from what you're saying, the family was not supposed to be living on the second floor. So my first question is, were any of them living on the second floor that was under construction? Sleeping in any of the bedrooms?
It appears that the second floor was occupied.
It was occupied, okay. So they weren't supposed to be there. And now, had there not been smoke alarms, we don't know, but had there, let's say there had not been any smoke alarms, would they have been allowed to live in any of the house or only certain portions of the house? Can you just clarify this one more time?
I could do that.
Yeah.
The certificate of approval, which takes place upon completion of the dwelling, requires that all of those components be operable and intact.
Okay.
Well, had that happened, the certificate?
We have not gotten to the final inspections.
So is it legal for someone to be living in a house under renovation that doesn't have a smoke alarm if they haven't yet gotten to the point where they have a certificate of approval?
You're asking if technically the approval process is such that whether or not someone should be living or occupying a space that has not been formally inspected for code compliance, the answer is no.
In order to do work on a home in Connecticut, does somebody need to be licensed in the state of Connecticut? Also, Mr. Borsino, was he licensed in the state of Connecticut? And if so, were there any red flags on his record?
Actually not. If you look at the inspection chronology and the inspection reports, I think that's probably the only job that he's conducted in the city of Stamford, but all of his procedures were correct. He had inspections in a timely fashion. He called them in when required, and he did so. Now you have to understand this. Between the rough inspections, which were already accounted for, and the final inspection that delivers a certificate of approval, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 8 months could lapse during that period. Depends on the detail of the work that's underway. And no other inspection is required until that very last inspection.
And do you have to be certified in the state?
Yes, you do. You have to possess a home improvement contractor's license.
And Mayor, pardon me for asking this question again, but
Frank.
for absolute clarity, I mean, it's not clear if there were smoke detectors in the house. That is not clear.
It is not clear. We do know from the building permit file that there was a recent amendment to the building permit application to install a whole new security alarm and fire and smoke detection system in the house. But what was in existence prior to that, we don't know.
Mayor, was Michael Borsino living in the house at the time?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that.
Do you know, Fire Marshal?
I don't know if he was living there, he was present that day.
Oh, okay, because someone referred to him as an occupant. I was wondering if he was living there or...
He was an occupant during the fire.
And did your conversations with Madonna and Michael Orsino shed any light on their relationship?
I have, no, we didn't go into that area.
Fire Marshal Callahan, when did they use the fireplace last? And did Mr. Corsino explain why he decided to empty it out?
Again, we haven't gone into all those details yet.
So we don't know when it was used last?
No, it was sometime, it appears to be sometime that night.
Sometime that night.
Can you tell us any of what Mr. Corsino or Mrs. Thacker said, off topic from the questions you've been asking? What words did they have to say that you can share with us just about anything?
No, it's still part of an ongoing investigation, and until we reach a conclusion, I don't want to share what
Also,
our thoughts
could you
on
just
that.
spell your name for us? Just so we have
Excuse me?
Could you spell your name for us?
Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Callahan, C-A-L-L-A-H-A-N.
Also, the home, does the home have any structural flaws which could worsen the fire?
Not that I'm aware of right now.
Would this office be able to provide us with a blueprint of the house where we could sort of, maybe one of you could show us, actually we're here or here, and where the fireplace was? Would you also be able to provide a floor plan?
The fire marshal's office?
Or can we get one?
The city of Stamford has that plan on file, and it is public record.
Okay.
So
Is it?
it's in the building department on the 7th floor.
Okay.
We have not been allowed in.
Yeah, we really would love to get a copy. Copies of
I believe that the chief building official is working on electronic file version of that so that it will become available for everyone.
Okay.
Just again, really quickly, did Mr. Corsino leave the house onto that sort of front roof area and then go back into the house to take one of the girls downstairs, or?
The answer to that.
Mr. Borsino, when he finally exited the structure, he jumped down from the flat roof, tried to gain entry again from the first floor, but it was totally impossible at that time.
When did he carry or bring those girls downstairs?
I believe he had the girls when they initially realized that the house was on fire.
Had he gone up from the second floor to the third floor to get them?
He must have gone up. We haven't talked to him about that, but from what he told the deputy chief that was on the scene, that the girls separated from him. Now you have to realize that with the amount of heat and smoke, how scared those children must have been, and they just left them.
Do you know where everybody was in the house when the fire broke out?
I would assume they were in their respective rooms sleeping.
Third floor, second floor?
What rooms they were sleeping in, I couldn't tell you. I don't have any idea.
Was the master bedroom where Mrs. Badger escaped from the house in a different section of the house than where the girls' rooms was?
I believe the master bedroom was on the left side of the house,
Okay.
on
Where
the
turrets
second
were?
floor,
I'm sorry.
in the turret part, on the second
Okay,
floor.
That was where the master bedroom.
And it was easy for them to come out a window because that's where the flat roof was.
Okay.
But the third floor, there's no, you come out and you're going to drop.
Was the grandparents on the third floor or the second floor? Do we know?
The grandparents were on the right side of the structure near the carport on the second floor, we believe, in a bedroom there.
Chief Fire Marshal continues that the investigation is ongoing, but with the structure being damaged and having to be raised, did that at all hinder the investigation or has it?
No, the fire marshals were there as early as yesterday morning. We needed to get into the basement to do the final analysis. The basement was pumped out on Christmas Day. They were allowed to get in there the following day. They did the last of their investigation. They no longer needed the building to do their technical conclusion. So at that time, the chief building inspector deemed the building unsafe, and it was taken down.
What did either of the survivors say about how they spent Christmas? Were they all home the night before? Did they say anything about what they did that night or their last night together?
No, we have not talked to them.
Have you scheduled follow-up interviews yet at this time?
Fair?
We're trying to, to make contact with them when that can be arranged.
And
Go ahead.
for the fire, again, sorry for the repeat question. So the two possible areas where the ashes were found. Now, were either the mudroom and the I forget the other one.
Trash
right? Were either of those spots exposed to the outdoors in any way, or were they all enclosed spaces?
The trash enclosure was exposed to the outside.
You'll notice that most of the questions that went unanswered have to do with personal interviews, and the sensitivity and of the tragedy and everything that we're dealing with here has postponed those. Those are the questions and follow-up interviews and discussions that the Fire Marshal's office will have in order to piece together all of the remaining facts. The facts that were raised in questions that you asked today, all good questions, but those we don't have the answers to, we hope to have shortly. I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to be done. Thank you. Who has it?
What about funeral arrangements?
We have no information on that whatsoever. Thank you. Okay, thank you.